Ministry. What is our opportunity? When you were talking about, I wish people could hear, you'd be amazed how many people, even as my neighbors, have been listening to me, but don't come to church. And I think that's an honor. I mean, frankly, that's an honor to me. But, so, anyway. We are going to get started. We're almost on time, which actually we are. I want to say thank you for coming out. If you are visiting because of the Memorial Day, if you are here because this is your church, we have people that are watching us all over, which I'm grateful for them taking the opportunity to worship with us, to spend time, and not just to listen to me only, but to see what God is doing in Winter, South Dakota, and their lives as well. We are grateful for people to come. I want to start this morning. This is Memorial Day, and we do understand, but many times we lose some of the significance of why we do what we do. One was sharing with me this morning that the reality is we wouldn't be celebrating what we even celebrate in our country without God. We would not be celebrating freedom, for example, without a God who created freedom. This world did not create freedom. It didn't just happen. We all know that freedom came, but it was given with a price. And I do realize as a nation we honor the military who have given themselves, and we truly want to give a tribute to them, and we'll do that as we begin this morning. But we also want to not stop there, because if we stop at that point, then we really miss where enjoying the freedom in this country really lies. And that's the freedom to follow Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. So we want to honor him for the one who has given us true freedom in life. And as we are reminded, freedom isn't to do what I want to do. Freedom is to do what I know I should do. And in the end, realize that is the best that God has designed for us. Before we go any farther, anybody have any announcements that we need to make? Oh, okay. I do have a request for you. Our church, again, is going through a bit of transition, as some of you have noticed. We are losing at least one. We seem to have lost contact with some others who have been coming on, who had come a little bit more regularly. The reason I share that is because next Sunday I may be preaching at Rosebud again for the first service, which means we may not have anybody to open the doors. We may not have some of the necessities that we think may have been important before, like if you like coffee, it may not be available. Receiving the donuts may not be there unless somebody picks them up. Even getting the door open, like has been done in times past, may be different because some of us will not be here maybe at time. I share that with you. If God is encouraging you to say, you know, I can do some of those things. Opening a door isn't that difficult. It doesn't mean you always have to come here and do everything. It just means this Sunday I'll make sure that the door is open and I'll take on that responsibility. So if you have any questions, we can talk about it later. I feed you as fuel of thought for this day's activities, realizing there is responsibility. I appreciate everybody who is here, and whether you'll be here next Sunday, I know summer is around the corner. That's probably why I'm going out of my character of nature and saying, guys, we got to address with it, or it may not happen, or it's going to happen in a different manner. And maybe God's been saying, you know, I can do some of these things. Maybe some of you are wanting me to ask you. Well, tell me to ask you, and I'll ask you. Because I'm kind of from that old school. I'm not real good at rejection. I've been rejected so much that I'm so grateful when my wife said yes. I cornered her, and I trapped her into saying in an emotional moment, will you marry me? That she didn't have a chance to negate it. I'm grateful for that, because if she'd have said no, I'll think about it, I may not be married today because of my fear of rejection. That's something that God continues to work on. So I say that, welcome, think about that, and we'll discuss that later. Any other prayer requests that might need to be brought to our attention that we can be praying about? If not, let's have a word of prayer and we will continue. Lord, thanks for the opportunity to be here this morning. I know it's a busy weekend for so many, and some are in the busyness of this holiday weekend. Thank you, Lord, for allowing them to take the time to share with us. And I know they have activities that are coming, so Lord, on we go. But for just a moment of this busyness, this moment of activity that we are a part of, we want to stop and say, Lord, without you, we would not have freedom. Now, there are people who are worshiping you around the world, maybe not at this time, but on this day. And they are not worshiping you like we as Americans worship you. They didn't come with freedom. They may not have coffee in hand. It may not be donuts. They may not come with even popularity. It may not even be that other environmental or people are worshiping indoors and facilities all around. It may be the only remnant of people that are worshiping you this day. But their freedom to do that is not based on, does our country say we can or can't? Their freedom comes in the understanding that I can do all things through Christ. That my freedom is not because of me. My freedom is because of one who came and died for me. Whether I'm in a prison, I'm still free. Paul would talk about that all the time in the New Testament. I'm free from things that really weighed me down. And that was the things of the world, or the things even of my own self. So we come today, and we want to say thank you for this privilege. But we don't want to take it lightly, and we want to realize we can lose this. We can lose the freedoms of our country, and we can even lose our religious freedoms. Sadly, we can allow the enemy to destroy those freedoms, even though we live in a reality of being able to do what we want to do. So we learn, and we invite you to come, Spirit of God. Without this, we will not worship you faithfully or correctly this day, because you have to work in our heart before you can work through the songs, through the scripture, through the words that are shared this day. So not only do we invite you to come, but we ask you to continue your work. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the privilege of being here with these people, followers of Jesus Christ, to honor you as King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and our God. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. A tribute, please. Some of you, the emotions of that thought may be very close to the surface. And it may not always be just because of a loved one who was in the military that has given themselves. But this is also a time of reflection to all those who have gone before us, who have given us life, whether it's parents, grandparents, as it were, these are also people that have affected our life, and we want to be grateful for them. For those who are now actively serving or have served us in our country, in life, we want to say thank you for all that you have done and are still doing to keep this company, this country, great. But one of the challenges that when you watch some of these videos and thoughts is there's a lot of sadness that wells up. And even the question that was introduced to me even this morning about what happens when we're gone from this earth. Well, the reality as a Christian is we have a hope that is greater than even the bounds of that grave. Life, as important as it is but a vapor, the Bible tells us. It comes and it goes like that. And no one of us, even in this room today, is guaranteed that we'll walk on for another 10, 15, 20, or plus years. We don't have that guarantee of life. The Bible says if you can live 80 years, you have been blessed with that. And not all are given that opportunity. So this is to be a reminder not only of the freedom that we have, but the opportunities that we have. Not only in economics in our country, not only in freedoms to do and choose and make choices in our country for vocations or locations or educations or our focuses of life. And we have a privilege that so many never even get. But we are also the nation that was given the greatest opportunity to hear about a God that we can trust in for now and for all eternity. And how that took place was through His Son, His willingness to sacrifice for us, to give the greatest thing that He could give for all of mankind, and that was His life. I ask you to stand. We're going to sing two what we would call patriotic hymns. We want to respect, because respect is being lost a lot in our country today. We want to teach that to our children. But also, as we sing these songs, I don't only want you to think about familiarity, maybe the first verse. Listen to the second and the third and the fourth. And notice how often this country placed its hope and its strength and its encouragement and its future in God's hands. Because that truth is a great lift as well. My country is mine. Sunday morning get so busy, so wrapped up with getting here, getting a sermon done, getting the details, getting the things packed up, getting here, that a lot of times I forget the beauty of the day. God has given us a beautiful day. So don't forget to not only thank God for the freedoms to enjoy the creations today. If it's raining, that's still beautiful in our country. We were in a land this week not too far from here that is needing some rain. So some people are inconvenienced by showers and activities that will thwart their plans. But we do have a great country. And now, think all the even from a broad perspective, the greatness of God's provision for us as a country, not only financially, but spiritually as well.
I know Jordan is a Marine. Is there anybody else has served in the military this morning? Serving in the Marines is kind of like halfway serving compared to the Army.
No conflict there.
Sorry, Jordan, I couldn't
They're
help
just
it.
not educated, that's all. Someday soon you'll learn, Bill.
All right, let's go, Lord, in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this Memorial Day weekend. We thank you for the time that we can reflect on those who have served our country and really those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms, for those who they serve. Lord God, we just lift up the families of those who are deployed right now, as we are still at war, which many people tend to forget that we've been at war for 15 years. And I just ask that you be with the families, the kids. We just pray that each one of us would just honor that sacrifice and that freedom that we have to serve you, to glorify you, and to spread your message and the freedom that you have given us through these selfless acts that we have seen. We know that love has no greater meaning than to lay your life down. And just thank you for those who have done that willingly. That song said to us that they loved their country more than their life. We ask that you bless these offerings as they come from your hand, that you would use them to further your kingdom's work in our country and our state and our community. And we just ask these things in Jesus'
sermon that I'm going to share with you this morning might seem a bit strange. So you've said, well, that won't be any different than any of the other ones. So that's okay. I'm going to try to make it short enough to where I don't ruin the day. But again, to challenge your thinking with what God is at work doing in our lives as people here in this church, and what he's doing with people around the world. I'm going to start with the illustration that may be a little bit hard to understand in some ways because of how it is written. How many of you ever heard of a gentleman years ago by the name of C.S. Lewis? C.S. Lewis was in England. He was a very brilliant man. A man who by his nature didn't need God. And there were things taking place during war times that really got his attention. First World, Second World War. War does shake our thinking. And there needs to be somewhat of an understanding in war times, what's the value of this fight? And even life is a war for many. Sometimes we truly need to understand what are these battles for. And you may be going through a battle here today. And that may be because of past. It may be something you're thinking about in the future. We do live in a war and a world of conflict. And the challenge that conflict brings to us is, who is our source of strength? What is the reason for doing what we're doing? I want to read an article that is written in the same format as C.S. Lewis when he wrote Screwtape Letters. And it was How the Enemy Looks at Us. And the title of this one, of course, you'll understand why it piqued my interest. It's called The Subtle Art of Sabotaging a Pastor. Okay? So now you know why it intrigued my mind. Take the word pastor off and say the subtle art of sabotaging a Christian, and it will make more sense to you. The second thing, as you listen to this, realize it's written from how the enemy is trying to attack us. So the words I use, flip them around, and you'll understand if it becomes confusing to you. But listen if you would. It says, "Dearest grub knot, my poppet, I want you to listen. The reports of your reports of your progress warm my blackened heart. When you were assigned to one of the enemy's ministers 10 years ago, his infernal majesty, and I knew you would have a rough go of it. The zeal of one who is new in the pastorate can be daunting and challenging to even the most cunning of our comrades. But we also believe that time breeds all wounds, and that your task would become easier the longer your patient remained. You now prosper from that sweet spot of pastoral fatigue and assimilation. The shine of newness is gone, and up pop the cracks in the ministerial armor. There are many temptations common among the enemy's under-shepherds, but one universal temptation that arises from their flesh, and it's this: they want people to be pleased with them. Wanting to be like it is not a sin, really. To use the enemy's terminology, it can be quickly turned into one of the hands of a spiritual disintegrator as shrewd as yourself. Some tax you might consider. Suggest to your client that he works for the people, not the enemy. That would be God. That this will not be hard to sell, as they are faced, you see, every day. Remind him who pays his salary. The quicker you can get your patient to see himself as a professional, as an employee, the better. Suggest to your client that he works for the people, not the enemy. This will not be hard, since they see their faces every day. Strike up with your fellow workers to send to his office voicemails and emails in the inbox of your parishioners after the parishioners give demands, requests, and philosophical banners to wave. Through that, purpose hill after hill to die on, all say Golgotha, don't die on the cross. Keep his head spinning. Even so, innocent concerns can be proper distraction from who you patient, who ultimately beholds, if it's so plausible, the substitutes of what is first importance of the bad news. Slip into people's pleasing mode can be masked as subtly as a serpent slithering in the tall grass. Help your patient to see that all he lacks, stroke his discontent. The less satisfied your patient is with what the enemy has done for him and all the enemy has given him, the more alluring the validation, approval, and praise of others will be. Empty him of his confidence by highlighting his failures, so that therefore his head will be far more easily swelled with adulations and self-confidence. Then pop those like a pin to a balloon and start again. It's easy for a pastor to move to pride. It's his default setting, so this should not be difficult for you. Turning your patient into a man-pleaser may require employment of what we have called the rope of dope technique, outlined as follows. First, make things very comfortable in the church for your patient. When he is very much pleased with himself, neither sober nor watchful, but drunk on ease and set to pastoral autopilot, then it's time to strike. Bring in reinforcements to stroke division and dissension in the flock. Put him on the defense. Demoralize him. Make him feel as though he has more to prove, more to be. Prod him to strive to enter the unrest. Make arrangements to see that he comes to the shepherd under compulsion, not willingly, much less eagerly, and suggest that he view the flock as problems to be fixed or resources to be used. If you could steer him into a position of prideful domineering, that will be most excellent. But the key in all congregational unrest is not to just divorce the people of the church from each other or from their leaders, but to divorce the leader from your faith in the enemy, which is God. Hype his understanding if you must, so he will lean on it. Or deconstruct it if you must, so he will fall back into the man-pleasing. Whisper, yea to you, when all men speak well of you. Convince him that difficulty is something strange, undeserved. Convince him that the allegiance to himself is suitable for the allegiance to the enemy. Convince him to seek peace at all costs, especially at the expense of the truth and of bad news. Your patient is a needy, insecure little man. Ply him with tenacious, vaporous security of being as it is, in the end, be all. And these are but rudiments of but one temptation. There is always more to do and much to learn, more to come if the enemy delays. Indefinitely yours, Wormwood. Now, whether you understood the principles of what he was trying to say, is that man innately wants to please man, and there's nothing wrong with encouraging people or having people say something good about you. But the enemy longs to attack us to the point where we become comfortable, secure, and dependent upon ourselves, more concerned about pleasing others than pleasing God. I saw this illustration as the sermon was being introduced, and it was about the times that we live in, and it was this. Spanish commentators emphasized our President Trump's election as apparently the result of populist surge among American voters. This guy was from Spain, and so he says Spain has experienced their own populist surge on the political front in the past few years. The general feeling is that our President Trump individually or definitely foreshadows a paradigm shift of major proportions. The whole world is expecting to be impacted by the new U.S. president's different style of politics and approach to problem solving. However, our focus today is not the president. I stop for a moment, and as I watch the news that flashes on my computer, as I watch what's on our local news or our national news, so much focus today has been on how is this man going to deal? What is he going to do? How is he going to change this world system that is being perpetuated? Anybody know what the definition of insanity is? You all do, but share it with me again. The definition of insanity is and expecting different results. But you know how many people fear the good results even? And not about our president, but a lot of people are more fear that he will change something and expose something then he will just leave it alone and not address it and just say, well, that's just the way it is in the United States of America. That is not the way it is. That's the way it has become. So if it has become that, then what can happen? Change can occur. Good change, but also bad change. Change can occur. You know, that's a world that I struggle with a lot. And I again thanked you for your patience with me as I deal through this transition of life, as many of you are dealing with. Change is one thing that many times we truly struggle with. You heard a term, something called a paradigm shift. There are more intellectual people. A paradigm shift means to you what? What does the word paradigm mean? This is why I'm waiting for all you intellectuals to help me here.
It's a complete change in thought pattern.
Okay. From taking what was accepted as a norm to now having it completely changed to a new norm. And we go, isn't that a paradigm? Yeah. Isn't that weird how all of a sudden we used to think this way, and now for some reason through circumstances we think this way. Even how we were taught. Ladies and gentlemen, however old or young you are in this world, you were taught by someone else from another generation how to think, how to accept, how to process, no matter what generation that was. Somebody influenced you from not only fact, but from their experience. There's no way of getting rid of it. But the reality is sometimes, and if we could take the time, we could probably go through, and would we say that, you know, maybe the previous generation didn't understand everything, even though we had to come with a conclusion, and we had to teach you something? But it may change. In fact, how many of you know it's going to change? If you've ever read the New Testament, read through the book of Revelation. It's a fascinating book about what the future says is going to happen from God's perspective. But God was talking to a man by the name of John, and he was trying to explain to John what is going to happen when he had no idea how to explain it. If I were to have asked Gene, when you were 20, to explain what an iPad is, without knowing what an iPad is, you might even say, I don't even know it now. But if you were to live in a generation that had never had a technology could even do that, and to try to explain it, wouldn't they go, you're weird? I mean, even though here God gave John facts that were going to happen, and we watched them unfold, how do you explain that? How do you explain that to your son when he just can't grasp it? But you do it, and that's a lot what God does for us. He explains something is going to happen, but you're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to, by faith, just trust me, and then when it happens, believe me. It's going to. Because prophecy said it's going to happen, or Bible says it's going to happen. I remember as a kid, how many of you were taught this? God said it, I believe it, that settles it for me. It was easier to do that before you understood what you were saying. Before you really grasped what that was going to mean. Until things were going to question you, or circumstances were going to challenge you. Well, culture and language and life are always in the process of shifting right under our feet. The Greek philosopher Hercules was perhaps one of the first to meditate on this reality. And he said this in the 5th century BC. All is flux, nothing endures, change is the only constant. He concluded that we really don't have time to understand the phenomena of life before it happens to us and it's over. By the time you kind of think you figured it out, it's changed. And life is over. And guess what you can't do? You can't go back and change it, can you? It's too late. All you can hope to do is maybe help someone who has not been there yet to not make the same types of wrong conclusions or choices. But you can't you can't even get them to not make the same choice you did. Maybe you can talk about it in generality, but to specific, man, that's even hard to do. You know, the reality that God is at work, and that even when Jesus came, and we've discussed this, he came to a work that was in a paradigm shift, or they didn't realize it. But in that paradigm shift, they needed a conclusion. Jesus came to this earth to give them a conclusion. And that conclusion was found in the Gospel of John, that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father but by me. And yet, wow, how do you explain that when they'd never thought that way before? It had never been taught that way before. From a man that, wow, although he could do miraculous things, how could this be right? Have you ever had somebody older than you tell you what's going to happen? You go, but how do they know? And I don't mean to be critical. It's been fun to watch my kids raise kids. It's fun. Now, and she goes, huh? It's not as fun as I thought it was going to be, because I was going to be in control and nothing was going to happen. And my kid was going to do not like the other kids, and you're not the only one that has that challenge. Everyone in this room goes, yep, that's right. But if I'd have tried to tell you that before, out of respect they might have, but I know me, I'd have been thinking about something, and at the end go, yes, sir. But if he'd asked me to repeat it, I'd have gone, I don't know, because it won't happen to me, right? Why wouldn't it? So the challenge of Jesus coming and sharing something that needed to be challenged and shared with was still a very big conflict for them. It's hard for them to do, to grasp that. Now, something that takes place, we continue on, we can't keep change from happening. So many times we find that it makes us nervous. Because if change is happening out of my control, I'm not in control, thus I'm nervous. That's a reality, it's just what we are. But we have to understand why we become nervous. Well, continuing on. Yet Jesus understood this better than any of us. He, as the eternal one, was able to come to earth at a particular moment in history, in the fullness of time, the scripture tells us, to endure the challenges of his life, to be content with what he was called to do, to be focused on his purpose and his mission. And since he did it to so perfection, he now is ready to give us that same hope in the times that we live in as well. When I was younger and more naive, I don't want to say foolish, but I didn't understand the whole picture, I often would try to teach people this principle. And I found this principle to be one of those that took a direct hit. Kind of like what you were sharing this morning. A definitive answer was hard, and it was this: that God has a plan for your life. And in essence, we may have accepted that ideal concept, but how many of you, when you got into that plan, found it to be a bit frustrating? Or had a problem saying, are you sure? Because of the circumstances, I don't think that could be God's plan because of my parameters of thinking. And what I hoped God would do, what I expected God to do, and what I knew God could do. And because of that, I started questioning, do I have a purpose here on this earth? And as I have asked many people through my wanderings as a Christian and as a pastor, why do you do what you do? It is amazing to me, and I had the assumption as a minister talking to Christians that they would say, because God called me to do that. This is his plan for my life. More times than not, what do you think the answer is that I get? Well, that's what I've always wanted to do. That's what I was gifted to do. That is just the way the lot was. And I go, okay, I can understand that from a perspective of not having God, but as a Christian, wait a second. What is my purpose for being here? And as a Christian, if you don't understand a purpose for being here, then what do we have any different than anybody apart from relationship to Jesus Christ? You know, we are in a paradigm shift right now in that thinking as well. And we're finding this even in the church. Paradigm shifts, though, are necessary for the church to stay alive and relevant. How many of you even grasp what I just said? Change has to happen in the church, or it will not be relevant. How many of you, though, have gone to church all your life hoping that a church would just maintain that comfortable relevancy that you once believed in? Or that it was to be the way I always wanted it to be? Or I remember it to be? And yet, to try to go back and live in the past and deal with today, there are some principles that are very important. For example, things that happen are going to happen again. They're called laws. You can't change them, even if you wanted to. How many of you would like to change gravity as you age? You go, no, that's an important principle. Do you know how many times I have said, oh God, just for this one time, I don't want gravity to work. I'm up in a precarious position, just about have the screw on, and I drop it. How many of you have prayed, oh God, just let it stay there? And it falls to the ground, and guess what? You spend the next day trying to find that little nut that you don't have, that you're 100 miles from town with to find, and it's there. And I got my wife out, I got my kids out, I got the dog out to try to find that, and I never, ever found it. And you go, why? Why? Because the law says if you drop it, it goes to the ground. That's why it happened. Now, is there something more to that? Why didn't God keep it up there for me? Great question. I must have had a different lesson to learn, didn't I? Something else that he was trying to teach me. But, you know, the challenge sometimes is that we forget these things. The second thing I like to share, but it's been this same pattern throughout history. We all think that now is unique. I don't know how many times someone has alluded to the thought, yeah, but no one else has ever gone what I've gone through. Seriously? You're the only unique person in the last 5 quadrillion people that have ever had this problem? I don't think so. E.V. Hill said, if I had a nickel for every time someone said, but you don't understand, he said, I would be a millionaire. Why do you think Jesus came to this earth to live and walk in this world? Did he need to be the sovereign God and Savior of the world? No, the Bible tells us part of the reason he did it was for us, so that we could realize he was tempted in all points like we were, yet he didn't sin. And you go, seriously? He never cussed out that bolt when it rolled away? He didn't have bolts back then, Pastor. See, that's not even relevant. You don't think a carpenter ever hit his thumb? And by the way, he actually worked more with rocks than he did with wood. In Nazareth, there was way more rocks than wood. So what was going to happen to his hands? You know it was going to happen. I'm almost done, Will. Honestly. Oops, I wasn't going to use your name. Sorry. Luke chapter 5. Turn there with me very quickly. Because as I shared, Jesus came to this earth to help give an answer to the paradigm shift that was taking place in his day. And that was a God design. We now look back and say, Jesus coming to this earth, living, walking, going through all he did was a purpose, but an ultimate purpose was so that you and I could have life and life eternal. There was a purpose to the paradigm shift that was taking place in their life. There is something, though, that I find myself intrigued with this passage, and we could dig in it a long time. When I was in Bible school, I was taught this. The Bible has one interpretation. What that means is when you read the text, it says what it means and it means what it says. Okay? You can't go in there and say, that text didn't mean that. Now, there's a lot of people trying to do that today. And why I take the emphasis point is because for the next statement I say. But there are many applications to what was being taught. So don't try to go in to the scripture and say, yeah, but that's not what it meant. It's exactly what it meant. That's why he said it. But he wants you to understand why he said it. Because today, you needed an illustration that at that time they could understand. Which I'm going to try to give you so that you'll understand today of what the principle he was trying to teach. Because when I read this, you're going to go, and I've heard this before, or this is strange. But Jesus was trying to teach some things. Chapter 5 of the book of Luke, Dr. Luke gives some very interesting details. A doctor would talk about healing a man, wouldn't he? Because the previous verses, he talked about a man who was paralyzed and how people were so concerned about him being paralyzed that they did something really strange. How many of you have not been able to get into a doctor? You hope that you could get into that doctor. How many of you have done virtually everything you could do to get to that doctor? For a family member especially. You've called the secretary. You've called the friend of the secretary who's a friend of the secretary. You called a nurse that you knew. You called everybody. And the passage says that they could not get into Jesus. So they took this friend who they knew could be healed by Jesus up on top of a roof like this, took a chainsaw, cut a hole, and lowered him down in front of me. Whoa. And Jesus heals this man. Who gets in trouble for doing this? Jesus does for healing the guy. You don't talk about him cutting a hole in the roof. Now, oh, Pastor, you don't understand the history. It was probably a thatched roof. Probably was easy to move it. But by the way, if anybody started cutting a hole through here, would that not be distracting? Wouldn't we say something right now? Wouldn't we go, wow? Well, first of all, we go, why don't you just use the door? Because we're not that busy. But this may have been more in a home setting, and there were people that flocked to Jesus because he mind-boggled people. He not only said it, he did it. From healing to words he said, the religious were confused by him. They didn't know what to do with him. Because he was saying things. How many of you have ever known somebody was talking about you, but you didn't want to believe they were talking about you? Every once in a while the Pharisees said, and they realized that Jesus was talking about them. So what's the big deal with that, ladies and gentlemen? Why is it so important that I make a statement that they understood that they were talking about them? What had to happen then? Change. It means, I know it. I know what you know that you don't want to let anybody else know. I know your problem that you admit or think to yourself that you don't have. And you need to do something about it. How many of us in this room would really like to get the problem fixed without dealing with the problem? That's why it brought them total frustration. Because he says, you're going to have to deal with the problem. And we're not the problem here. You're the problem. No, Jesus wasn't the problem. He was just exposing the truth. There's a passage, and the one I want to talk to very briefly, that says this, and it's found in verse 33 of Luke chapter 5. It says, one day some people said to Jesus, John the Baptist's disciples fast and pray regularly, and so do all the disciples of the Pharisees. There had been an observation from their past that they had watched, and their understanding of how you became a good godly individual, there were certain things you didn't do. And all of you who were trained in Sunday school were taught. A good Christian doesn't, right? We're all taught that. So they're introducing to Jesus because they've seen something different about Jesus and Jesus' followers. And here's what was different. Why do your disciples always eat and drink? Now, it sounds like a strange question. Why do we always have fellowship meals at a church? Because I like to eat, okay? But why do you do it? And before, a good, godly person sacrificed and didn't eat, and there were things you couldn't do. This does sound like Christianity you were raised with. Christians can't do this, 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 and this. And so they're asking, how come your disciples can do this? Now, this is specific. They're talking about eating and drinking, so you can't change that one. But let's go on. So Jesus responded, verse 34, do wedding guests fast while celebrating with the groom? How many of you ever gone to a wedding on a diet? Oh, that's frustrating. Because they have a prime rib meal, and they have that white cake with the thick frosting that I like, and they always have a tray of nuts, and a lot of times the people I really like have those bowls of M&Ms right in front of me. Oh, I love those weddings. Let me know if you have one. I'll go, I'll pray with the meal, whatever it is, because I like that. So I walk in, Sri and I walk in, they go, oh, I can't eat that. Oh, I can't eat that. I want that. There's a few of you that don't come to our fellowship meals because you're on a diet. And we don't feed you what you can eat. So you go home. I understand that. Some of you just don't like my cooking, but that's okay. I can understand that one too. But you see, there's a conflict. And so Jesus said, have you ever been in this predicament before? What did you do? Continuing on. Did you fast? You said, no, today I'm going to celebrate. It's a special occasion. So he continues on to say, of course not. But someday the groom will be taken away from them and they will fast. He's trying to help them to see something different. That you're not always going to have this celebration going on. And he's talking to them about him. One day he's going to be gone. So while he's here, let's celebrate. While the groom is here, let's celebrate. And one day that groom's going to be gone and you'll quit. But then he says something else. He gives them an illustration of this. Then Jesus gave them this illustration, verse 36. No one tears a piece of cloth from the new garment and uses it to patch an old garment, for then the new garment will be ruined and the new patch won't even match the old garment. And I talked about this before. Again, some of you understand this. Some of you even came up and said, yeah, I get that one. You know, it's really hard to take an old patch, an old pair of jeans that's been ripped. And they used to make those iron-on patches. How many of you ever bought those things? You know, you ripped and then you ironed them on and you tried. So how many of you ever noticed that when you did that, where did it rip out the next place?
Around the patch.
Right around the patch. And you go, why? The patch was perfect. What was the flaw?
The material.
It was the material. Why did you want to patch, by the way, why did you want to patch those jeans? Most likely, not always, but most likely.
I only had 2 pairs.
Okay, thank you. Let's not use, no, you're right. Okay, I'm not going to argue with you. That's probably to a great reason. It is.
Your favorite.
You wanted to keep it. You were comfortable in them. Now, what is comfortable in your generation's jeans when you go buy them? Daryl used to work at the Buckle. What did they have right here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here? And I wonder, why are you wearing pants anymore? If you wanted them, I got a pair. I don't usually want them ripped out in the crotch, sorry, but that's where mine are. But, you know, I got ripped pants here, I got them. And they, most of the time, it's because I'm warm, and I'm a typical man. And washing them is only necessary if they're standing in a corner and I can't get into them. Okay? I got enough grease, I got enough stuff on them, I don't need to wash them, I'm just going to get them dirty anyway. But what does that do to the material? It rots it. You know, you can't put battery acid on it and never wash it and think it's never going to rot. So Jesus is using a very definitive, you'll understand this because every woman understands that. Even a man would grasp that the problem is not the patch. The problem is the material. How many of you realize it isn't the method that is the problem, it's the person doing it is the problem. The second thing he says, and of course good Christians like I was would never talk about this because of what we're going to talk about, but it's this. And no one puts new wine in old wineskins, for the new wine will burst the wineskin and ruin the skins. New wine must be stored in wineskins, but no one who drinks the old wine seems to want the new wine. The old is just fine, they say. Excuse me. Now, I was raised, you don't talk about anything that has alcohol potential in it on, because that's just not a good Christian. I've long since lost that philosophy. That's not important to me. And I realize I'm learning more and more why people do what people did. And that's the thing, or do, because that's the part that Jesus could understand. But he uses a very unique illustration. How many of you realize this is the wineskin he's talking about? That's what he was talking about. Okay? That was basically a lamb skin. And when they were going to have more, because what do you do with any kind of liquid substance in time? What happens to it? You drink it, okay? It's eventually going to run out. So you have to do something different, right? You got to get more. So they would put it in one of these things. Now, to understand the illustration, this is the one that's dried. And he makes the comment, he says, everybody understands this. When you take grapes and you put them in a wineskin, there's going to be a process called fermentation that takes place. Now, why they put them in a new wine is because that gas leaked. That's why they did it. They weren't trying to be sanitary. Is when that CO2 gas was going off, it leaked in a new carcass. But what happens with old skin? Eventually, after time, it started to get crispy and crusty, and those holes sealed up. Excuse me. So the reality was, if you want more, you have to do it in the way that God said it will work. And you know you can't do this. And I wrote down some conclusions, if I might. Some I want to share with you is this. As a church, what are we as a church? Are we individuals that make up a group, or are we parts that fit together to form a function? I hope you understand what I just said. Many times people come to the church thinking I'm an individual that gets something from it. And then I walk out and I do what I do. How many of you realize the church, though, was designed to be parts put together to do something greater? And until you understand that concept, you may not grasp this next illustration. Because if you realize that God has planned, there's a shift in the paradigm. Even everyday life, there's a shift in your life and my life. And how are you going to deal with that? And to deal with it, there needs to be the understanding of how to deal with it. Jesus was going to say to the people that grasp it, what are you? So I ask you, are you trying to be old wine in old wineskins? You say, what's wrong with that? What's the problem with old wine and old wineskin? What's going to happen? It's eventually going to be gone. That's probably as simple as a statement as there is. If you drink of it, what's going to happen? One day you're going to turn it over and you're going to go, and you can't get any more out of it. So how many realize if I want more wine, I have to crush more grapes? But I've got to do it in a way that is beneficial. It's right. So some people are trying to stay old and old. How many of you realize that's a frustrating thing? You can't even stay old and not change, can you? So lessons of life, you cannot stay the same, even if I try. The second thing is, some are trying to be old wine in new wineskins. Okay, we've heard that. What's going to happen if you put new wine, if you try to do something different in an old body? I want to exercise so bad, but there's a problem. I have a old body. I want that pill that's on Facebook that they eat, and all of a sudden, It just goes like this. I want that. You know, I want my wife to go, whoa, not oh, okay? But I realize something that happens also in old age. What used to be up, settles. I still wear the same pant size I did in high school, so there. It's just as hard to get around my chest anymore. It don't fit there anymore. Used to be up here. Now it's down here, and I don't have any hips to keep it on, so it's a constant battle. But if you understand what it's saying, if you do that, if you try to become new in an old body, what's going to happen? It's not going to work. And we've struggled that. Church has struggled with trying to do something new in an old way. And no wonder we have so much frustration. It doesn't work. There's another one. Sometimes we try to put old wine in new wineskin. Well, what's the problem with that? If you put old wine in a new wineskin, that it won't blow up the wineskin, will it? But what's going to happen to it? And this is kind of an interesting observation. Maybe you don't get this one as quickly. If you put new and old, what's going to happen to the container? Eventually it's going to become old and you wasted the container. One day it's going to get hard too, and then all of a sudden you have old stuff in a new container, and all of a sudden it's like putting dirty dishes in a clean container. What's going to happen? You're going to contaminate the container. So you got to make a change. The last one then is the illustration that Jesus said you need to put new wine in new wineskins so you can meet the need God intended you to do. I want to do something and I'm done. Number one, what's the function of wine?
The replacement of bad water.
Okay. Could I say hydration? There is hydrating processes to it. Okay? Now, don't go deeper than what does it do. Okay, it does hydrate. Would you agree? Sure. Sometimes we wonder why we need to drink that much, but hey, understand me. What else does it do? Okay, it has health. Of course, that one was really hard for some of us, but when Paul said to Timothy, Timothy said, which one was it? It said, you have a little health problem, have a cup of wine every night. Okay? Didn't say a gallon, but he did say a cup every night. Okay? So it has some medicinal purposes. Anything else? Pardon? Yeah, and I wrote two things. It aids with coping and comfort. And that has helped me a lot understand people in life. Everybody has to have a coping and a comforting message. Everything that we have talked about that wine can do has a benefit. But if you also realize to an excess, it can do the exact opposite of that. And I close with this. Isn't that why Jesus came as well? Didn't he come to the thirsty to give them drink? Didn't he come to those who are in need for help? Didn't he come for those who are in comfort to comfort? Didn't he give those who have health needs the way to heal? You know, the challenge that I've seen is sometimes why we struggle so much is we're missing and trying to replace with what the world has to offer the one who can meet all those needs. And his name is Jesus. Father, as we close this service this morning, we thank you for the event and the special time and the day. And we again are reminded that we've been given a wonderful opportunity to be here. Some would say it's a chance, and boy, I can't sit there and try to argue them through a system of thinking. But if it is just chance, then there are some other things that you never should be complaining about, is why do things happen. If there is a design, if there is a designer, then I know we are accountable to that designer, and there are some things he said we should and shouldn't do, and that sometimes is a big struggle. We don't really want to do what we want to do, or at least be told what to do, but yet you have in best in mind for us these things. We've been given freedoms. Oh man, we've been given the greatest opportunity to live in this country. Some are going to go out and enjoy fishing. Some are going to put flags on graves today. Some are going to go home and relax. Some are going to rest this day. Some are going to go to work. That's the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. But those freedoms were never to take place, the true ultimate freedom, and that was found in life in Jesus Christ. Is it difficult for us maybe to grasp? Yes. But yet in reality, when we claim those promises, when we search for a need, and the world's searching for an answer, my prayer is they would see that Jesus Christ is an answer, but he's also the answer to life and to its freedoms. Now, I talked for a minute, Lord, with these Christians who realize, again, why am I here? And a good important thing to be reminded is when we do all the things of realization of why we think we're here, who gets the glory at the end? And as a Christian, we do all things to the glory of our Savior. And that's just a subtle but gentle and reminder to us all about remind why we are here, maybe why we're going through some things. Maybe we wouldn't have come to that conclusion without it. Maybe without losing a bit of control, we have not done what is right for us. Maybe the circumstances that we're going through would have never been dealt with unless confronted with it or reminded that it's okay. I am God and I'm in control and I do love you and I do care and I have a purpose and I have a plan. I have a reason for why I'm doing it, not just because of random chance, but because of a great design for you. It will help you, but ultimately it will bring glory to me because it will bring you closer to me. So what a privilege. So on this day of celebration and feasting or festivity, may again we be reminded that you are the God that truly gives freedom that lasts for all of eternity. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you for coming this morning. I did want to share with you very quickly that Judy is leaving us and she is going to Sioux Falls. Various reasons, but we are going to miss her. And we're having a meal for us, for her, for them. And we also have something we want to give her before she takes off, just to make her cry and to say, you know, you're going to forget us. No, you're not. We appreciate all you have done and do. What we just had, we wanted to give you a Bible from the church and a devotional and a card. And whether you come back and see us again, who knows? It might be. But these will be things that will benefit you. And again, we say thank you for coming and your faithfulness to us. And we pray for you as you go on to the next challenge and instruction that God is doing in your life as well. So you're welcome to stay. There's pork out there, some ribs, I don't know, whatever else people brought. And if you have things to do, I understand it. Some of you are going to put some flags on graves and so forth. I realize it. Come and go if you can. But thanks for coming and worshiping with us today. God bless you. We'll see you.
You don't.
No, no.
I think.
Blew up here.